So I am thrilled and really grateful to Elaine Rasmussen for taking the time to share her fantastic expertise with the MinCup audience, or with our community of folks who are interested in applying to Minnesota Cup and maybe have some deeper questions and would appreciate some more advice as they're thinking about sharing their business idea with an outside audience. It is really common for people who apply to and participate in Minnesota Cup to be really early on in their idea generation and maybe be sharing their idea publicly with other folks for the very first time when they apply. And that is a really valuable thing to do. It's a really important thing to practice, but it can be scary. And when an idea is in your head and you're like the biggest advocate and the one who knows the most about it, it's not always easy to synthesize or sort of condense down what someone else is going to care about. Because hopefully you care about every little part of it, otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. So the goal of this workshop is to help you think a little bit more about what to prioritize, what external audiences care about, and how to put your best foot forward in a written application or a pitch or something. So Elaine is deeply experienced in this work. She is the founder and CEO of Social Impact Strategies Group, which is an incredible resource here in the Twin Cities for founders. And she has a wonderful history too of working in for-profit, nonprofit spaces within Minnesota, outside of Minnesota. She really knows entrepreneurial ecosystem work and has been doing this stuff for a very long time. So thank you so much to Elaine for sharing your time and expertise with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for that wonderful, auspicious introduction, Jessica. Always a pleasure to share space with you. And it's always exciting for me to be in a room of entrepreneurs, founders, however you self-describe yourself. And it looks like we've got a jam-packed room, so that's super exciting as well. And more are coming here in the waiting room. So my name is Elaine Rasmussen, and we are here to talk about the dirty 30 of due diligence. Let me see if I can get, oh, great, this is working. So here's how we'll spend our time together today. We're not going to do a lot of introductions. I'm really going to be talking about just giving you a better idea of who I am and a little bit about my background and what brings me to this work. I'll tell you a little bit about Social Impact Strategies Group, and then we'll dig into the meat of why we're here, which is the due diligence process. What does it mean? What does it look like? What can you anticipate? Why you should even care? And then we'll go through an actual checklist. And I believe I will not be sharing the slides, but I have shared with Jessica a handout, a 5-page handout that goes through everything that I'm going to talk about today. And that will be sent out to everybody after the webinar is complete. So, and I don't know, Jess, if you have a survey, but you can link those to make sure that people fill out the survey, is that you'll get them a copy of the handout. Excuse me. And then if we have time, we'll do some breakout sessions so you can actually think through and workshop some of the things that we've talked about. So I'll try to be mindful with my comments, and once again, wanting to give us ample time for questions, but also maybe give you some time to, in small groups, think through some of the things that we've talked about. So welcome, 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 everyone. It's such a delight to have all of you, see all your beautiful faces. I am the founder and CEO of Social Impact Strategies Group. I am also the founder of our corporate responsibility arm, which is the Connect Up Institute, which is newly launching. We've been doing a lot of the work that ecosystem building work, investor education, entrepreneur education as part of Social Impact Strategies Group. And the work is growing so expansive that we decided we were going to launch a corporate philanthropic arm, and that all that work is going to move over there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But a little bit about my background. So back in ancient times, I'm way older than I look. I've been gifted with really great genes. But way back in ancient times, I used to work at Shearson Lehman Brothers. And if you don't know who they are, they were the precursor to Bear Stearns, which was the precursor to Merrill Lynch, which is the precursor to capitalism as we know it, for lack of a better term. I was a stock analyst, and it was literally my job to go and research stock and identify the optimal stock for traders to buy and sell on the market. As you can imagine, in 1988, I was living in Santa Barbara, California, where I was going to college, and there was no other person of color in the Shearson Lehman office that I worked in. And I think I was the only woman who was not a secretary. So, with that experience, I did that for a while and decided that wasn't where I wanted to be. I didn't want to feel that lonely every single day of my life. And so I ended up leaving and went and took a career change and got into marketing and communications and public relations. And I did that for a number of years in a variety of different industries, working in the entertainment industry, working in the fashion industry. But I was always very grateful of my finance sort of roots, and I find it interesting now in this sort of second half of my life, I've kind of made my way back into finance, but more with a purpose. So I'm really excited about that. I am a transplant. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. And I was sharing with the team before we got on this call that I've been living here now 17 years, and it's been a great place to raise my son. And, while today was not the best day, we've got rain today. I am grateful that we're making this turn as far as the weather goes. So a little bit more about Social Impact Strategies Group. We are a certified B Corp and social enterprise. So we are mission focused, purpose focused, and our work is concentrated on providing consulting and facilitation as it relates to racial equity, impact design and implementation, social impact design and implementation, inclusive economic development, and corporate responsibility. So I spent a lot of the time before COVID traveling around the country, talking with other ecosystems, talking with investors, talking with bankers, talking to almost anyone who will listen about how do we need to actually change our systems, our financial systems, our ecosystems to actually benefit from the power of all of the participants in the ecosystem. Because as we know, a lot of our ecosystems are set up intentionally and sometimes unintentionally to service predominantly a set of populations. So really my role is really talking about and unpacking how do we do that at a systems level? How do we shift some of these things? How do we shift our thinking? How do we shift our practice? So what we like to share with people is we don't do DEI training, but our organization is the organization you call after you've had DEI training. And now you're trying to figure out how do I operationalize and shift not only my social impact, but our racial impact, and how do we align our work with our racial equity goals or our social impact goals. Connect Up Institute is a social finance and enterprise development innovation center. We provide education workshops not only for investors on how to align their money with their values. What does it look like beyond philanthropy to actually have an investment portfolio that aligns with your values, but also for entrepreneurs, predominantly what we call second stage entrepreneurs. And while the second stage for us is any business between year 2 and year 10, we get an opportunity to start with a lot of startups. So that's really, really super exciting. We're going to be launching soon some CEO circles. Last year, we did a lot of one-on-one advising as a response to COVID and helping businesses pivot or apply for PPP or apply for other funding opportunities. And we're going to be revamping that and relaunching that in April to do some more one-on-one business coaching and advising that will be available for a very nominal fee. We're going to be launching an investment fund. I can't say a lot about that, but it's coming. So I'm super excited about that. And I think businesses like yours are optimally primed for to take advantage of that funding opportunity. So this workshop is timely. And then for some of you, you may have seen or heard about the Connect Up Summit, which happens every year. In March, we will not and are not planning to do one this year at all because we really believe that our conference is really about a relationship building and there really is no substitute for being in person. So we've decided to suspend Connect Up this year and we will be bringing it back in March next year. But we're going to be doing lots of things like partnering with MinCup and Jess and her team to make sure that we are providing some different opportunities that will offset the conference. So let's now get into the meat of why we're here. And the question comes up, and I can imagine, what even is due diligence? It's a financial term that's not necessarily in our everyday vernacular, our everyday kind of how we talk to our friends. No one says, have you done your due diligence lately? And so many of you might have ever even heard of this term due diligence. But really what due diligence is, it's really to demonstrate for an entrepreneur, that you're looking to grow, and whatever that means to you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to be a global company, but whatever growth looks like to you, that you are demonstrating that that is what you're trying to do, and that you have the potential to get there, and that you've actually thought through the pathway to get there. For investors, it's a matter of the due diligence process allows them to identify and either determine or well, to determine how aligned your business is with what their investing outcomes, their desired investing outcomes. So if they're looking to get a 30 times return on their money, the due diligence process is going to inform whether or not they think that your particular business is going to get them there, or at least get them close to there. But also, is it viable, right? And as you are thinking about agreements in your due diligence process, are they able to uphold their end of the bargain when it comes to due diligence? And we'll talk more about that. But this is really about the due diligence process. Is really about it's akin to dating. Is this person the right person for me? Is this the right money for me? Is this the right person to be partnered with for me? What does this look like? Can we come to some kind of common ground on all of the issues or all of the topics that are going into this particular deal, whatever that looks like? And we'll talk a little bit more about what deals look like. There's typically a three-step process when it comes to due diligence. And the process is really around the first step. I like to call it screening due diligence. And the thing about screening due diligence is that you don't always know it's happening. So, very much like an interview for a job, somebody may have been referred to the person who's extending an invitation to you to apply for a job. But best believe they've done some of their initial homework. They may have Googled you, they may have looked on your social media, they may have seen you at a Min Cup pitch, they may have seen you someplace else, they may have seen you being written up someplace, maybe in the Star Tribune or maybe North News or some other sort of media outlet. And so they're watching you. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come up to me, say to me, "Oh, I've been watching you for a while," right? That's screening due diligence. People are kind of like behind the scenes. You don't always know it's happening, but they're watching what you're doing, how you're showing up, where you're showing up, and where have you progressed from the last time that they saw you. So never underestimate the value of any room that you step into. There is somebody there who has been watching you, will start to watch you. And so you just want to be mindful of some of those things and how you show up and how you present yourself. Then there's business due diligence. So business due diligence is when now we're actually looking at the business, right? It's not just necessarily you and like, oh, you know what? Stacy looks super, super exciting. She seems like she's going places. Like, I'm just going to start like watching her on social media, right? This now is like, okay, now, Stacy, we're going to have a conversation about the business, right? I've been watching you for a while. Now I really want to understand, what is your business like? What are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go? How fast are you trying to expand? But it's that deeper assessment into the actual business. This process tends to be a little bit more formal. It's usually initiated by some entity. It might be a bank, and so when we talk about due diligence, I should have talked about that a little bit. There are a variety of different people who might do due diligence. There might be a bank that might do due diligence. It could be a potential investor. It could be somebody that you're partnering with. It could be an organization that you plan to partner with. It could be a purchaser. If somebody's looking at maybe buying from you in mass quantities, they're going to do a level of due diligence as well. So due diligence isn't a particular, it could be somebody's job, but it's a lot bigger than that. So when you start to get into the business due diligence step, that's usually initiated by some sort of entity. It could be a bank, it could be an investor, it could be a partner organization, it could be a purchaser, it could be the county. If you're bidding for a job for the county, or you're bidding to provide services or products to the county, there is a little bit of a due diligence process that they go through to make sure that you're a credible vendor, make sure you're not going to run off with the money, make sure that you're going to be responsible and show up the way that they're anticipating that you show up. And once again, that process can take 30 to 180 days. So it just depends on what kind of entity has initiated that business due diligence process. Then finally, you have what's called legal due diligence. And that's typically the last mile, right? You're kind of closing in. This is where now, once you've gone through your business due diligence, you and the organization that you're partnering with or that is looking to invest in you, you've negotiated the terms of your deal, whether that be, like I said, a business loan. You've decided, okay, this loan is going to be a 5-year loan. It's going to be a 5% interest rate. It can be used for working capital, and we're going to delay your first payment for 6 months, right? So you maybe have come to an agreement on on the terms of the exchange, whatever that exchange is. But this now is like, okay, now there's a contract, and everybody's lawyers and accountants have to read the contracts, sign off on the contracts. And this process can also be a long process. For those of you who have maybe purchased a car and you've ever had to sit in the showroom while you're trying to wait for the finance manager to give you a thumbs up on whether or not you're going to get the car, that's a shorter version. If you've ever had the privilege of buying a house, you know that that's a longer process. So when it comes to business, it can be shorter, but a lot of times it's a little longer because there's a lot of back and forth of asking you for documents. They might ask you for your profit and loss statement for the last 3 years. You might get asked, well, I need your quarterly tax returns for your employee wage summary reports. They might ask you, this is where the part where they're basically underwriting, which is they're making sure that they've done all of the things to make sure that you are able to agree or execute on the terms that you're agreeing to. So those are the 3 steps of due diligence. So now we're really going to get into the heart of our conversation today, which is, okay, what is the actual due diligence checklist? And a precursor to this, I personally feel that this due diligence checklist that I'm going to be giving you is not just for if you're looking for an investor. These are just good business questions that you should be able to answer no matter what. Now, that doesn't mean you should be able to answer them all today, particularly if you're a startup. You may not have thought about them. Some of these may not apply to you yet, but eventually you should make a practice of, like, what I do is every year I go through this checklist and, like, I decide in that year, that coming up year, what is something that I'm going to focus on? What part of this due diligence checklist am I going to focus on and shore up and, like, make super, super tight? And the reason that I think that that's really helpful is because year over year, you're constantly improving the business. You're constantly improving how you tell the story. And now you're incorporating this process into the business, as opposed to, oh, wait, I've got an investor, or I'm trying to get this bank loan. Let me start working on all this now. But if you start to incorporate it, it's kind of like adapting a good eating diet, right? You can wait till you have a special occasion and then straighten up for that special occasion and eat right for that special occasion and lose the weight, and then you gain it all back. Or you can make it a practice and just eat well all the time, right? So you're not going through these fits and starts. So there's about 5 buckets that the due diligence checklist falls under. And some of these are maybe super, super obvious. So making sure that you have a legal name. And when we say legal name, that means you have filed with the appropriate state entity. In our case, it's uh, uh, the it's escaping me now, but the Attorney General's office. You file and say, we are officially a business. These are all the partners. These are the operating agreements. Here are the owners. This is the percentage of breakdown. But making sure that you have all that at least written down in a document. And what we have is we have an organic document where we keep all of these and we answer all of these questions. And that's a good way, once again, if you're operationalizing this and incorporating it in the business, you have this document now that you can keep going back to. Your bylaws, your operating agreement. If you are in a partnership, I don't care in what phase of development that partnership is in, you need to have a partnership agreement. You do not necessarily need to have a lawyer look at it, but you should have something sketched out that talks about who owns what happens if something happens to you, what happens to your shares, and what money each partner has put into the business. So just some basic things, and you can write it on a Google Doc. It doesn't have to be a legal document that you both sign. And I would also add that you should probably have a date of when you're going to revisit that conversation. So let's just say you're a startup, it's you and your friend, you're starting this business, you haven't even filed legally. You should still start a partnership agreement of some sort and say, okay, in 6 months, we're going to have a conversation to revisit this, right? Or maybe it's in 12 months, but you should start writing something down about what is the agreement between you and your one or more partners, who owns what, who, like I was working with an organization that I was going to be an initial investor for, and the whole company was based on one person's intellectual property. There were four partners, but the whole company was built on this one person's idea. And so my question was, well, what happens, God forbid you win the lottery and you decide to go live in Tahiti forever? What happens to this company as a result, since this whole company is built off of your intellectual property? What happens? Who gets ownership? How does that get passed? Like, how are we going to deal with that? So you definitely want to take this opportunity to look at all of the good and the bad. The next thing is financial. So this is profit and loss statements. And for some of you who are startups, you don't have profit and loss statements yet, but you will. And your profit and loss statement just says it's sad. Like, how much money did you make? How much money did you lose? What you're paying in payroll. You might get asked what your bank statements. You might be asked for 940 or 941 statements. These are your wage summary reports. The 941, I believe, is the 940 is the annual wage summary, and your 941 is your quarterly summary that you have to submit to the IRS every quarter. They might ask you for a trailing revenue stream for the last 12 months. So if you're in June, they might say, we want all of your bank statements or your revenue going back to June of last year. Or they might say 24 months, or they might just say, hey, we just need calendar year of last year. They might ask for your personal tax returns as well as your business tax returns, even if you're incorporated. But particularly if you're looking at an investor, they want to see how are you managing not only the business's money, but your personal money. They might ask for W-3s. As it relates to legal, they're going to want to see what kind of structure you are, because the structure that you are will sometimes dictate how much money you can take in what ways that you can take in money, and how that money needs to be structured. So this, while it seems like a little thing, is going to be an important thing to an investor or a bank to be able to understand, because there are norms around how those businesses function, which dictate things like return on investment. They dictate how does the person get repaid, and what are the remedies or things that they can do to ensure that they get paid or repaid if it's a loan. You're going to be asked about your articles of incorporation. You might be asked once again about your operating agreement, and you're probably going to be asked around what's your contingency plan. So just to the point that I made about the company that I was going to be investing in, whose intellectual property relied on one particular human, the legal question is, who has ownership if something happens to that person? If that person just disappears off the face of the earth, they decide to go live in a hut on a beach somewhere, and we never hear from them again, where's the recovery? Do we then just split the equity of that particular person amongst the rest of us? Do we have to go through that person's heirs? Like, what's the legal structure as far as understanding what happens if something great happens, but also if something not so great happens? Then there's communications. So people will want to know, hey, what's the best way to reach you? Is it by phone? Is it by email? Who is the person that they should be contacting and connecting with? So for me, I am on a lot of calls. I do a lot of speaking engagements. So very rarely is my name the contact person for anything that happens in our organization. And that sometimes is, if you are a type A, I'm a recovering type A person, you really have to have an honest conversation with yourself about, hey, maybe I'm not the best person to be the contact person because I'm bad at following up on email. I'm bad at listening to voicemail. I'm bad at whatever the thing is. And so making sure that either your partner delegate the task to the thing, to the person who's best suited for that thing, and don't think of it as you're deficient. It's like you're concentrating your energy and effort on the things that you're good at, and that person can concentrate on the things that they're good at. Don't wait until a crisis to start relationships. So one of the things, we did a lot of support with PPP last year, as well as the SBA idle loans, and people were coming to us in crisis. And actually, even before that, people won't don't call us until they're in a crisis. And I would encourage you to start planting seeds and building relationships with different entrepreneur organizations now, so that when you come, you're not saying, hey, I need $10,000 in 10 days or my business is going to fold, because it's very rare that we can help you once you get to that point. So, and particularly relationships with your banker. And I know this can be challenging, particularly for people of color. The finance sector has not necessarily been our friend, but I'm going to invite you to get outside of your comfort zone. And the next time we go into when the world kind of opens up, I encourage you to be thoughtful and mindful about purposely going and talking with the bank manager of your bank, building a relationship with your bank manager. And it can be just as simple as like, hey, my name is Lynn. I've been a customer here for 10 years. This is my business. I just wanted to introduce myself to you and let you know, and business is really great. And I just want to let you know, I'm going to be stopping in every quarter just to kind of check on and see, do you have any great programs that I should be aware of? But you just start the conversation informally. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Start building relationships with CPAs. And the reason for that is not so much that you're going to hire them, although you might when your business gets to a certain size, but by building that relationship, you can say, hey, if I ask you like a question via email, can I bug you to answer that quick question? Because it's a lot cheaper to be able to kind of get that free 5-minute advice than to have to pay a retainer to a lawyer or to CPA to get your question answered when you're backed up against the wall. So marketing, when it comes to due diligence, they're going to be looking at who is your customer base, how big is the market, how much do you really think of the market that the market share you'll be able to take with your product or service? What is your sales on ramp? How long does it take you to acquire a new customer? How much does it cost for you to retain a customer? These are things that are going to come up in the due diligence, particularly with an investor and even with a bank who might be looking to loan you money. These are the things that they're going to ask you. What makes your thing so unique to anybody else that's doing the same thing? And maybe there isn't anybody doing that what you're doing, but it's only a matter of time. So what's your distinction in the marketplace that ideally positions you to keep on your growth so that they can be repaid, right? Or they can see their return, whatever the case may be. And what is your brand? So I was just talking with a company this past weekend. We're working on creating a $1.6 million capital stack for them. And I said to him, it was our first meeting, and I said to him, uh, his logo, he was in the eyewear universe. And I said, well, the thing that struck me is your logo does not feature eyewear. Your pitch deck doesn't feature eyewear. And I feel like those things should be connected. Like if you look at Parky, was it Warby Parker, you look at Lens Crafters, there's some kind of iconography that tells you like, oh, this is an eyeglass company. So I'm like, you might want to, I'm like, I'm not here to tell you what to do, but if I were an investor, I would be like, well, and I'm sure you've heard this on Shark Tank many times. They're like, hey, your branding doesn't go with your actual product or service. And I want to be able to know by looking at your logo, like what is it that you do, particularly if it's a product, right? Because you're a product before you're a brand, right? So if in this particular instance, it's not going to be like there's going to be this whole universe of other products that are going to be coming out. It's eyewear. So what is that? So the logo should be more closely, I thought, should be closely connected. And at the very least, the deck should feature some of the glasses that they're going to be selling, right? It seems like a duh, but it's one of those things that you're so in it that you can't see. So you need other people to kind of come from a outside perspective. And then finally, there's intangibles. So once again, talking about the value proposition, it's about what does the universe look like, and does the universe look like it's going to support a business as such as yours? So I'll give you another example. I sit on a board that is a mission social enterprise. We're a $30 million social enterprise organization, MDI. We provide gainful employment with people with disabilities. However, our product is an injection mold plastic. And for anybody who saw John Oliver last week, tonight, this weekend, that was the theme of his show, was plastics. And the 3 years that I've been on the board, the thing that I have been pushing is, what are we going to do when the mandate comes down that plastics are banned or outlawed? I said, what's our plan to get out of the plastic business, right? What kind of other biomaterials can we use? And we need to start looking at that now, because it is only a matter of time that companies who are generating their revenue off of plastic-based products are going to be challenged with replacing those polymers. And so an investor or banker is going to be looking at, especially if it's a loan, over the life of the loan, what anticipations can we expect that how the universe or external forces are going to change that will distinctly, directly or indirectly impact your business. Because that is going to impact whether or not you're able to repay the loan or return the dividend that they're looking for. Also, what kind of skeletons that you have. And I'm telling you, y'all, people will always find out. And I think that, and it can be hard, I think, to trust. And when do you divulge that information? And that's something that's not like I can't just tell you like when, but you definitely want, if there's any skeletons, at some point in time, you want to reveal them so that your investor doesn't get sideswiped, your banker doesn't get sideswiped, because the person these are people who are going to be advocating for you, and they don't want to look stupid. So they don't want to be someplace and then somebody out of the blue tells them like, oh, did you know such and such and such and such about so and so and so and so, about George, right? And it's like, oh, snap, like, oh, and then they've got to come back to you, and now you've got some explaining to do, right? And now you just look untrustworthy, right? So it's just a good thing of like thinking about being mindful of like, hey, you know what? I got into a little bit of financial trouble 5 years ago. This is what happened. I lost my job, blah, 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 blah. And just say that, right? And if somebody can't see past that, that's probably not the person you want to be in business with anyway. But also just thinking about, is this the right place and the right time for your product? So now let's see, where are we? Oopsies, let me go back. So I think we're now at, yeah, we're perfect. I'm like right on time. Woohoo. So it looks like there's some questions. Is there questions in the chat? I couldn't see the chat. If you can help me, Jess.
Yeah, I will tee some of them up for you. Give me 1 second. I'm just yeah, the one question that Michael asked that is helpful is when it comes to those lists of documents, or what, that information that you recommend people gather and then update periodically rather than waiting until an emergency, does it make sense to store them, especially since it would have a lot of maybe sensitive or confidential information in them? Whether that's in like a data room or other places, what would you recommend?
Sure. I think there's lots of options out there, right? And some platforms actually do that for you. So we use QuickBooks. So some of those documents are in QuickBooks, and you don't have to do anything. You can just download them as a particular person might call for them or need them. I definitely encourage, if you have QuickBooks, that you use the archive feature. But the thing that I also do with like all of those documents that I generate in QuickBooks is I download a copy and I have a folder, and I call that folder financial documents. So every year I'll generate a profit and loss statement, and I'll keep that, and I have them chronologically. I have a naming nomenclature for all of my documents. And so if it's the 2021 Q1 940, that's what it's called. So I can look at it quickly and know, like, if I am trying to get a PPP loan and I'm getting a list of documents of what I need to, all I have to do is literally type in 941, look for 2021 Q1, and it's a PDF. So all I can do is like, I can drop it into an email. So that's a long-winded way around your question. I think that there's lots of options like Dropbox. I think we do everything on Google. We have an enterprise version of Google Docs. So we use Google. I think that you can put them on a jump drive and keep them with you, or keep them in a locked box. There's lots of different options that you can do, but I would just start the habit, right? That's the big thing, is start the habit of generating quarterly reports, get into the habit of doing annual reports, and the three being the profit and loss statement, an income statement, and also your customers. Doing a list of your customers, so you can start to really examine, like, who are your customers and how are they buying and where are they buying, and understanding, like, at the end of the year, I find it really helpful, particularly as a consulting firm, of like, what was the average size of our contracts? How many contracts did we execute last year? How many contracts did we not win last year? It really helps me in the planning for next year, thinking about, okay, if we're trying to move to be a $5 million in revenue and our average contract size is $75,000, how many contracts do we need to close? And if that number is, let's say it's 100, how many contracts do we need to have? How many proposals do we need to send? Which usually is like 3 or 4 times that. So we need to send out, to get 100 contracts, we might get to send out 400 proposals. But that's really valuable information if you're trying to think about your time, right? And how much HR support that you need, whether it be through contractors, or whether it be in hiring staff. So I hope I answered the question. I know it was a little long-winded.
That was awesome. I think you did, but the one other question that's in here relates back to the partnership agreement. Do you have any recommendations for templates? I know you mentioned off the top that especially when you're early stage, this doesn't need to be something that you need to pay a lawyer to create, but there could probably be good versions and bad versions. So what would you recommend for people to use as a starting point?
I'm really scared of templates. I'll be honest with you, for a lot of different reasons. You really need a template that's for your state. And that's why I said start simple. Like, what are the 3 or 5 things that you all need to agree on right now, especially if you're pre-revenue, right? This is really about just making sure that you are both operating, or all of you are operating under the same assumptions, and getting clear about that. Because I will tell you, with this company that I was planning on investing in, where the intellectual property belonged to one person, we were not all on the same page of understanding how much ownership every person had. And when we got to the conversation about the intellectual property, I felt that the person who was going to be working as the CEO, he was going to be getting a higher rate of equity, because he was going to be working as the CEO for a time without salary. So I said, well, right now, the way this is constructed, you're getting the biggest piece, and the 3 of us, including the person whose intellectual property the company is based on, are getting the same amount. I think he was getting like 40%, and then the 3 of us were getting 20% each. And I said, well, one, I'm not going to be working on the company day to day, and I really feel that this is inequitable as far as this company being relied on the intellectual property of one person, and I'd be willing to give up some of my equity to make sure that he should be getting more than I'm getting, as somebody by which this company wouldn't be without him. So we were clearly not all on the same page as far as like who should be getting what and for what. And the guy, it was funny because he was like, after the meeting, he was like, I'm so glad that you brought this up, because my thinking was, we'll figure this out, right? And that's what I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. I think particularly entrepreneurs of color, it's like, oh, well, we're friends, we'll work it out, we'll figure it out. And no, no, no. Have a conversation about it today. You can always change it. Like I said, if you put in there, like, we will be renegotiating this in 6 months, or we will revisit this in 6 months or a year, or whatever the time is, but make sure so we weren't on the same page. I had a very clear idea. The CEO had a very clear idea that was different than mine. And the guy who the whole company is built off of didn't have any idea, right? So that is not a good way to be like moving a business forward in that kind of ambiguity. Because what if Salmon came in and said, okay, I want to give you $1 million. Okay, now that creates a whole nother set of issues that you have to deal with. But if you're clear on like, this is who owns what, this is who's responsible for what, now it makes it easier when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to give you $1 million. You're like, okay, We know how to handle that. At least you have some semblance of idea that's grounds what the conversation is going to be.
That was awesome. Yeah, lots of positive feedback and one helpful search term from Natasha. So thank you for sharing that, Natasha. But yeah, everybody loved that, Elaine. I don't see any other new questions in the chat yet. And Elaine, from like a slide management standpoint, I see that a few of us have our cameras on. So if it's up to you, Elaine, is the chat flow good with you, or do you want to go to more of like a grid view so we can?
No, let's go to a grid view. Let's stop share and go to grid view, and people can popcorn questions. This is like, ooh, I'm like, when you're doing a thing, it just doesn't, you can't see everybody. Now I can see everybody. Awesome. But yeah, you can popcorn questions, or yeah, if anybody wants to come off of mute, that would be great. Or if you can ask me questions about me, you can ask me anything. I don't know if I'll answer, but you can ask me anything.
Also, I mean, sometimes people are like, I don't want to be the first person to talk. So if that's you, fair. You can always also just raise your hand with a little function, and I'll like call on you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have to be that formal either.
Well, maybe I'll ask a question, and people can maybe type in the chat. So, is what's it? Ugh. What is something that maybe concerns you about the due diligence process, or right in the chat? Now, having had this conversation, what is something you want to work on in the next 90 days?
That is a
Looks
lovely
like
question.
Zeta. Is that Zeta or Zeta? Sorry, if I say that wrong. I had a really good friend, and growing up, her name was Zeta, and she was like one of my favorite people.
Excellent. That's a great place to start for me then. My name is Zeta, but
Yeah.
Thank you. So my question is, you suggested building a relationship with a CPA, someone that maybe you can ask questions of and stuff. Where do I find a CPA to befriend? I don't like, how do I even start trying to build a relationship with a CPA? Related, I'm going to throw this out here too. I'm actually to the point where we need to hire someone for marketing and helping us with our brand and creating our logo and stuff like that. And I'm not sure where to start with that either.
Sure. Perfect. Great question. So one, I love Natasha put in the chat, LinkedIn. Yes, I'm a big fan. Go to your bank and they'd be like, hey, is there somebody here at the bank that can answer? Like a bank will usually have CPAs or accountants. As you are going to different events like MinCup, you will probably run into some CPAs and accountants. So say, hey, can I follow up with you? Can I have coffee with you? Like 20-minute virtual coffee, and just be like, hey, like, what I've done is I'm like, hey, I just want to learn more about your work. What's your specialty? And so now I can start to build a sort of like, I have a personal CRM and Airtable, where as I meet people that are personal, like that can help me with my business, I put them in there. And then like every probably once a quarter, or once every 6 months, I'll be like, hey, just want to give you an update on like where my business is. And, if you've got 20 minutes, I'd love to ask you a question. Like, people really want, especially here in Minnesota, people want to help people. So if you're mindful about your ask, and if you're going to ask them for like 20-minute conversation, know what your questions are. Even if it's just one question, ask a very pointed question. And um, and if you're done, don't fill up the time. If you get your question answered in 10 minutes, say, you know what, thank you so much. I'm going to give you 10 minutes back in your day. I really appreciate your time, because they're going to respect that you respected their time. The other thing about your question around finding a branding person, depending on what your budget is, I have found some great talent at MCAD. The person who actually designed our first logo was an MCAD student, and then the person who designed the current logo that you see right now, this SISG logo, she was a person who was referred to us by somebody at MCAD. So there's meetup groups that you could like, hop onto and just be like, hey, we're a startup, we're on a limited budget. We'd really love for somebody to maybe spend 5 hours helping us with X, Y, or Z. So once again, the clearer you can be about your ask, the more clear can people can be like, oh, I'm willing to work with you, or I'm willing to do this piece, and this piece for a reduced price. But for this, I really need to command full price. But if you can, and sometimes you don't know what those are yet, but if you can have like, hey, I want our logo designed. Okay. Like that's a concrete thing, and start the conversation from there, and then build on until you start to figure out some of the other pieces. But try to just, yeah, Fiverr is really, really great. Envato, Envato Marketplace, they have actually like, I think our first one I purchased off of Envato, our first logo, I just bought online, and we've been a bit involving it for the last 5 years, and now it is what you see it is today. So yeah, thank you.
That was an awesome question. Thank you, Zeta. A really quick plug as well, or just something to echo or remind you of. Any questions at all that you have about the Minnesota Cup application process, because I think everything that Elaine has shared is really relevant to what we offer. We are here for early stage companies, and we bring together a lot of those service providers and kind of make a ready-made network for you through our process. So just a hot tip, or that if you're really trying to plug into multiple things at the same time, going through our process is a really helpful step to take.
Yes.
So I'm going to start firing some links and some resources into the chat for you in case you're new here or you're not already plugged into our application process. So check out those links if you want more information about MinCup, but also feel free, if you have a direct MinCup question, you can fire that at me too. But yeah, I want to give Elaine the floor because she's incredible. So I'll start to do that again. And then Chris, do you want to ask your question next?
Yep. Part of my question is due to Elaine's ecosystem building, like the social impact strategies group, and also to the general topic of due diligence. A lot of us are relatively new in our ideas or fields, and are trying to figure out, how do I do this for myself? But how do we perform due diligence on potential partners? How do we figure out, like, what should we ask of other people who are also relatively new, pre-revenue, and haven't figured out their own documents?
That is such a great question, and thank you, because I neglected to mention this point that's related to your question, and then I'll answer your question. All of this is negotiable. Everything is negotiable. And you have every right to push back on anything that's put in front of you. Now, that does not mean that everybody's going to agree with what you're pushing back on, or the terms that you want, but you have agency in this process. I think a lot of times you are made to feel, I think particularly women, and I think particularly women of color or people of color, get made to feel that they don't have agency and they just have to take whatever somebody is putting in front of them. And that is not the case. You can walk away from any deal. You can ask for something crazy in any deal, and you never know. Like, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? So that's that piece of it. And then to your question, Chris, about how do you do due diligence on a partner? How do you do due diligence on the person that you're looking to either invest in you, or a financial institution? I think it's some of those same questions, right? Maybe a little bit reversed, but it's like, hey, what's your track record? How many businesses have you invested in? What was been the outcome? What was the duration of your investment? What worked? What didn't work? Can you refer me to that person? So I can talk to them about their experience with working with you? If it's a financial institution, what has been the performance of that financial institution? If you're a woman-owned business, hey, how many women-owned businesses did you do loans with last year? How big were those businesses? Because that's going to give you some indications as to how they show up, right? If they are a financial institution and only 20% of their loans are done by women, okay, that's a flag. I won't say it's a red flag, but it's a flag for you to notice of like, okay, if they've only done 20% loans to women-owned businesses, are they not Is there a problem in how they do their process? Is there a problem in how they talk to women and make them feel alienated or try to make them feel stupid? So is this a financial institution that you want to work with? What's been your experience dealing with them? This is another reason why you want to start building a relationship, because people show you who you are before you actually need them, right? And if every time you go there, they ignore you, they don't treat you well, they don't answer your questions, well, do you want to get into a 5-year commitment with them, like with a loan? I don't know. Maybe you do. But that's only a question that you can answer. But you can ask all of these questions to any person who's looking to align themselves with you. If it's a partner, go look at their social media. What kind of stuff? Are they a live cannon where you're now going to have to be on damage control? So I'll give you a really quick example because I know we're running out of time. I was about to go in on a project with another organization, and we were going to partner on this RFP. This RFP was for a major financial institution here in town, and the revenue that was going to come from it was starting at like $750,000. So this was a nice big contract that we were going in together on. And this person, every time we were meeting to prepare our proposal for the RFP, they were always late. One time they were supposed to be meeting at my house and they were over 2 hours late. And when they got there, they were like, sorry, not sorry. And they're like, oh, it was traffic. I'm like, it's summertime in Minnesota and you've lived here your whole life. First of all, traffic wasn't that bad that you're 2 hours late. I mean, it was just her whole like way of being. And I'm like, that's not how I am. I'm either on time or I'm not going to be 2 hours late to a meeting. That's for sure. Even if it's a partner, I'm not doing that. And so I was like, so I finally there had been a couple of incidents where this happened. And I said to her at one point, and this was right before we were supposed to submit our proposal, I said, if this is how it's going to be, this doesn't work for me. I don't want to have to worry about whether or not you're going to show up to any particular part of work that needs to get done. And if this is how you operate, that's fine, but it doesn't work for me. And I'd rather just not submit this proposal and walk away from this $750,000 opportunity, because the amount of time and energy I'm going to have to spend in chasing your ass, like that's mental health for me. Like nothing is worth my mental health. And I'm not chasing anybody over some money. Either we want to make this money or we don't. And if you don't, like, that's fine. But, and so she was like, you would walk away from this? I said, absolutely. My mental health and my business, how I manage my business, will not be subjected to somebody else's bad behavior. Or I should not say bad behavior, but behavior that doesn't align with how I like to do work, right? So I was like ready to throw this whole RFP down the toilet, because what I'm not going to do is get into a $750,000 contract and I'm spending all my time and energy chasing after this person to get their work done. That's what's not going to happen. So I said, I'd rather just walk away, because my peace of mind costs way more than $750,000.
That was super helpful. I mean, we have about 5 minutes left. So does anybody else have anything they'd like to raise? I know that there's so much more that we could share and talk about, but want to give another person a chance to ask something if anyone has a question.
And while we're waiting for that comment, I just wanted to just respond to what Stacey had put in the chat of like, yeah, it's really hard. And I think this is a cautionary tale of, while you all, if you're in a partnership, you should have clear, distinct roles, but there should be some cross, I don't know if we want to call it training, but you should be having these sort of like what I do with my team is everybody knows what's going on at a high level. And we try to take opportunities. We used to do Infrastructure Fridays. And what Infrastructure Friday was, we would take an hour and we would work on something having to do with the infrastructure. So maybe part of that was like training other people on different parts of their particular job. So now it's like, you at least kind of know some of the other stuff that's happening or how it works, as opposed to, and the whole goal is, yeah, if somebody has COVID, right? At least the rest of the team kind of has some sort of a understanding of like, what's that person's role and responsibilities, so they can weave together some fabric to be able to at least shore up while that person is out.
I haven't seen oh, here we go. Question came through. Thank you so much for typing it. There's a lot of information to gather or touch up prior to the deadline? Are there resources or one-on-one mentorship to prep for the sake of time? So that's a super good question. I assume that you mean related to pulling things together for the Minnesota Cup application, and this is a lovely thing to get to clarify for everyone, so thank you for asking it. All of this stuff that Elaine is talking about is really important to think about at some point, but it's all relative to where you're at in the progression of your company and what you have coming up in front of you. So if you're about to seek investment or get a loan or take on other types of like legally impactful relationships, do all of them. But when it comes to Minnesota Cup, like our application process, that is, you do not need to do all of that stuff to be able to apply. And a lot of what we offer, a lot of our purpose for being is to help people who don't have connections to vendors or partners or want to work with a mentor one-on-one because they have a specific business issue and it's not their lived experience or they're not the expert in that space. So I put right above your question a link to a live application overview session. Both myself and Jamie Bartlett, who's on this call, you can give a wave, Jamie. We are offering in-person live hour-long times where like usually between 5 and 25 people sign on each session. We walk through the entire application and kind of tell you like, this matters the most. This is nice to have, but don't sweat it. Like, and really bring you through all those questions. But truly the goal of the MinCup application is to be super accessible. So if there's something that Elaine shared that you're like, holy shit, like that's really smart and good thoughts, but there's no way I'm going to have that ready in 2 weeks. You probably don't need to. So thank you so much for asking that question, because it's like, if you know all these things and you have these ducks in a row, you will have a super strong MinCup application, and thinking about Elaine's checklist will give you some new thoughts or sort of help you frame what's important and what's not important. But it's definitely, it's not all mission critical for you to apply.
Yes, and there are lots of folks around town that can help you with various aspects. So if you're waiting, if you're like, hey, I'm not going to do MinCup this go round, I want to put some things in place. There's, Social Impact Strategies Group. As I said, we're going to be relaunching our one-on-one technical assistance in April. There's Neon on the north side Economic Opportunity a network. There is Neighborhood Development Corporation on the St. Paul side. There's Emerging Prairie that's up north in Fargo, Moorhead area. So there's lots of us around, and Jess and myself, we can definitely connect you with other folks as well, because I think knowing all of this and the span of this is really valuable as you start to move through your stuff. I know we're at time, but I would love to have everybody populate. I always, whenever you come to anything that I'm doing, I'm going to have a little accountability check. So I want everybody in the chat, if you're able to, like, what is one thing, regardless of whether or not you're working on the application or not, what is one thing you're going to work on that came up today in the next 90 days? What's something that you're going to kind of like zero in on? We're going to be accountability buddies.
Yeah, I 100% believe in the power of like speaking something out loud or typing it out loud.
And while folks are doing that, I just want to say thank you so much, Jess, for this opportunity. Always, like I said, love sharing space with you. I always get inspired by seeing founders, emerging founders, repeat founders, and just being able to give a little bit of my wisdom out there, and hopefully in a way that is approachable and easy to understand, but hopefully demystifying a lot of this stuff, because it can feel like sometimes you're walking through a fog. And this stuff isn't hard, it's tedious. But it's not hard. So it's just a matter of breaking the inertia to move, one foot in front of the other and move forward. But I know you all can do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for your chat comments. It's super appreciated. But I also want to extend a much bigger thank you to Elaine. Your expertise is unreal and so helpful and relevant. And it's just fantastic to get to share space with you on a Zoom. And I love having you as a partner in the community and all of this work. So thank you for your time. Thank you to all of you for showing up and you know, putting yourselves out there and investing in yourselves, whether that be personally or through your business, whatever that means for you right now, we're here for it. And I'll shut us down just to respect everyone's time, but please check out the chat, and hellomincup@umn.edu is our direct inbox. So if for some reason you missed any of the other links, or you want to get in touch with Elaine and you didn't like catch your email or any of those things, we can route you. So thank you again, and just have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, everybody.